The leather smelled of old sweat and dust, cracked in places where the sun had worked its way through years of hard riding. And Delilah Summers ran her fingers along the brake with the practiced eye of someone who had spent more hours mending gear than most men spent riding it. She sat on an overturned crate outside the general store in Rico, Colorado, in the spring of 1882. Her needle moving through the tough material with steady precision, while the mountain air carried the scent of pine and distant snow down from the peaks that surrounded this little mining town tucked into the San Juan Mountains. The coins in her pocket from yesterday's work jingled when she shifted, a sound that meant the difference between eating tonight and going hungry, and she had learned long ago not to take such small victories for granted. Her father had taught her the trade before he died in a cave-in at one of the silver mines 3 years back, leaving her and her mother to scrape together whatever living they could in a town where women's work paid half what men earned, and often came with expectations she refused to meet. Her mother took in washing, her hands raw and red by evening, while Delilah had discovered that her skill with leather and her willingness to work for less than the saddle maker charged meant a steady trickle of customers who needed repairs but could not afford new equipment. The sun climbed higher over the false-fronted buildings that lined the main street, and Delilah squinted against the glare, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid that hung down between her shoulder blades. She was 21 years old, with calloused hands and a straight spine that refused to bend even when the grocer short-changed her, or the mine foreman suggested she might earn more in the saloon. She had her dignity and her skill, and she intended to keep both intact no matter how hard the wind blew through her life. A horse's hooves clopped against the packed earth, and she glanced up to see a rider approaching, tall in the saddle with the easy posture of someone born to it. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun, dust coating his dark pants and vest, and as he drew closer, she could see the lines of his face beneath the shadow of the brim, sharp features tanned from long days outside. Maybe 25 or 26 years old, with eyes that swept the street in the careful assessment of a man used to watching his surroundings. He reined in near where she sat, and his horse, a big bay gelding with white socks on its front feet, snorted and shook its head against the flies. The rider swung down with the fluid grace of long practice, and Delilah went back to her stitching, aware of his approach but determined not to seem eager. Customers came to her, or they did not, and she had learned that appearing desperate only drove the price down. "You the one who does leather work?" His voice carried a hint of Texas in the vowels, rough at the edges like wind over stone. "I am." She did not look up, finishing the stitch before she tied it off and bit the thread with her teeth. Only then did she raise her eyes to meet his, finding them an unexpected shade of blue-green like deep water. "Name's Emmett Irving. I run cattle up in the high country, and I need someone who can handle repairs on the ranch. Got saddles that need mending, harnesses wearing through, all manner of things. The man I had quit last month went down to Durango for better wages." He tilted his hat back slightly, studying her with the same careful attention he had given the street. "Heard you do good work." Delilah set aside the saddle she had been working on, property of one of the miners who would pick it up tomorrow. "Heard from who?" "Tom at the livery. Said you fixed his driving harness, made it better than new for half what the saddle maker wanted." Emmett gestured toward the saddle beside her. "That your work?" "It is. Can you ride out to a ranch? It's about 8 miles north of here, up past Alder Point. I can pay 50 cents a day plus meals, and I've got a bunkhouse where you could stay if the ride gets too long in bad weather." He said it matter-of-factly, as though offering work to a woman was no different than hiring any other hand, and something in Delilah's chest loosened slightly at the lack of presumption in his tone. 50 cents is fair. She stood, brushing dust from her split riding skirt, an item of clothing that scandalized the church ladies but proved far more practical than trying to work in traditional skirts. When would you want me to start? Tomorrow, if you can manage it. I will ride back tonight, but I can meet you at the livery at first light and we can ride out together. Emmett pulled a coin from his pocket, a silver dollar that caught the sunlight. Consider this a deposit on the work. Delilah took the coin, feeling its weight in her palm. $1 bought a lot of flour and beans, and the promise of steady work for 50 cents a day meant security she had not known since her father died. I will be there at dawn. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and agreement, then swung back into his saddle with that same easy motion. Bring whatever tools you need. I have got leather and hardware, but if you have got preferences in needles or thread, best to bring your own. She watched him ride away, the bay's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that hung in the still air before settling back to earth. The dollar in her hand felt like possibility, and she closed her fingers around it tightly before tucking it into the pocket of her skirt with the rest of her coins. That evening she told her mother about the job over a supper of beans and cornbread. The small cabin they rented on the edge of town smelling of wood smoke, and the soap her mother used for washing clothes. Her mother, Martha, had worry lines etched deep around her eyes and mouth, put there by years of hardship and loss, but she managed to smile at the news. 8 miles is a fair distance, Martha said, ladling beans onto the tin plates that served as their dishes. You will need to pack provisions in case you get stuck there. He said there is a bunkhouse I can use if needed. Delilah broke her cornbread into pieces, using them to soak up the bean broth. And he is paying 50 cents a day. That is more steady money than I have seen in months. What do you know about this man? Her mother's voice carried the protective edge of someone who had seen too much of what the world could do to young women. Just what he told me. He runs cattle up in the high country. Tom at the livery vouched for my work to him, so Tom must know him well enough. Delilah chewed slowly, thinking about those blue-green eyes and the straightforward way Emmett had offered the work. He seemed decent. Seeming and being are two different things. Martha set down her spoon, fixing her daughter with a steady gaze. You be careful out there. Stay alert, and if anything feels wrong, you come straight home. We will manage some other way if we have to. I will be careful. Delilah reached across the table to squeeze her mother's work-roughened hand. But we need this money, and I need work that will last longer than one repair at a time. They finished their supper in companionable silence, and afterward Delilah packed her leather tools into a worn saddlebag. Needles of various sizes, strong thread waxed to resist weather, and all for punching holes. A small knife kept sharp as a razor, and the few other implements of her trade. She added a change of clothes, her comb, and the small Bible that had belonged to her father, its pages soft from reading. Sleep came slowly that night, her mind turning over the possibilities that tomorrow might bring. Steady work meant she and her mother could build up savings, maybe even move into a better cabin or replace the stove that smoked badly when the wind blew from the north. It meant security in a world that offered precious little of it to women alone. She woke before dawn, the sky still dark beyond the single window of the cabin's sleeping room. She dressed in the dim light, pulling on her split skirt and a simple cotton blouse, then her worn boots and the jacket that had belonged to her father, altered to fit her narrower frame. Her mother was already up, stirring the fire to life and setting coffee to boil. Take this. Martha pressed a cloth-wrapped package into Delilah's hands. Biscuits and some of that ham from the grocer. You will want something in your stomach for the ride. Thank you, Mama. Delilah tucked the package into her saddlebag, then slung the bag over her shoulder. The weight of her tools was familiar, comforting in its solidity. The walk to the livery took 15 minutes through streets still mostly empty, though lights showed in some windows where early risers prepared for their days. The livery stable smelled of hay and horse, warm animal bodies creating their own heat in the cool mountain morning. Tom was already awake, mucking out stalls, and he looked up when Delilah entered. "Come for your horse." Tom was 50-something, grizzled and bow-legged from a lifetime around horses, but his hands were gentle with the animals in his care. "Yes, sir." Delilah had a mare she boarded here, a little sorrel named Penny she had bought with money saved from a good month of repairs the previous summer. Keeping the horse cost her, but it meant independence, the ability to travel for work or supplies without depending on anyone else. Tom brought Penny out, already brushed and fitted with the saddle Delilah kept in the tack room. "Emmett Irving is a good man. Known him since he came up here 5 years back and bought that ranch. He is fair and honest, works hard, and treats his people right. You will be safe there." The reassurance settled something in Delilah's stomach that had been tight since last night. She thanked Tom and led Penny outside, checking the cinch and stirrups with automatic care before mounting. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, deep blue fading to purple, and then to the pale gold that preceded sunrise in the mountains. Emmett arrived moments later, his bay fresh and eager, dancing sideways until Emmett settled him with a quiet word and steady hands on the reins. "Morning, Miss Summers. Miss Summers is my mother. I am just Delilah." She spoke the words firmly, establishing from the start that she did not stand on ceremony or pretension. "Delilah, then. And I am Emmett, no need for anything fancier than that." He turned his horse north, and Delilah brought Penny alongside, the two horses falling into an easy walk side by side as they left Rico behind. The trail climbed steadily, winding through stands of aspen and pine, where morning birds called and small creatures rustled in the undergrowth. The sun rose fully, spilling light across the mountains in shades of gold and amber, and Delilah felt her spirits lift with it. This was good country, harsh sometimes but beautiful, and she had been born here, shaped by its demands and its gifts in equal measure. "How long have you been doing leather work?" Emmett's question broke the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Since I was 14. My father taught me, said it was a skill worth knowing because gear always needs mending and people will always pay for it." She kept her eyes on the trail ahead, watching where Penny placed her feet on the rocky ground. He worked in the mines, but he had learned the trade from his father, who had been a saddle maker back in Missouri before moving west. "Your father still in Rico?" The question was casual, but Delilah heard the real inquiry beneath it, the careful assessment of her situation. "He died 3 years ago, cave-in at the mine, buried 6 men that day." The words came out flat, worn smooth by repetition until they held no sharp edges left to cut her. "It is just me and my mother now. I am sorry. That is a hard way to lose someone." Emmett's voice carried genuine sympathy, and when Delilah glanced at him, his expression matched his tone. "My own father died when I was 17. Fever took him during a bad winter in Texas. Left me and my brother to run the ranch, but we were too young and too stupid to make a go of it. Lost everything within 2 years." "Is that why you came to Colorado?" She found herself curious about this man who spoke so plainly about loss and failure. "Partly. Wanted a fresh start somewhere the land was not already claimed or fought over. Heard there was good grazing in the high country here, and I had saved enough to make a start." He gestured ahead where the trail opened into a broad valley, grass greening with spring growth and a creek running silver through the middle. Bought 160 acres with water rights, built a cabin and a barn, and started with 50 head of cattle. That was 5 years ago. I am up to 200 head now, and I run them up into the high meadows in summer where the grass grows thick. The valley was beautiful, surrounded by mountains that still held snow on their peaks, and Delilah could see the sense in raising cattle here where the water ran clean and the grass grew rich. It looks like good land. It is. Hard in winter, but good. Emmett pointed toward a cluster of buildings visible in the distance, dark wood against the green valley floor. That is the ranch. Not much to look at yet, but it is home. As they rode closer, Delilah could make out the details. A cabin built solid from pine logs, a barn large enough for horses and equipment, a smaller bunkhouse, and several sheds and corrals. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, and chickens scratched in a fenced yard. It spoke of someone who planned for the long term, who built to last rather than just to get by. They dismounted in front of the barn, and Emmett led both horses inside to unsaddle them. The barn was neat and well maintained, stalls mucked clean and hay stacked in organized rows. Delilah appreciated the order of it, the care taken with every detail. "Let me show you the workshop." Emmett hung his saddle on a wooden rack and gestured for Delilah to follow. He led her to one of the sheds, opening the door to reveal a space set up specifically for leather work. A sturdy workbench, good light from a large window, tools hanging on the wall, and stacks of leather in various thicknesses and grades. This is where Jacob worked before he left. He kept things organized, and I've tried to maintain it the same way. Emmett stepped back to let Delilah enter and examine the space. "If you need anything else, you tell me and I will get it." Delilah set her saddlebag on the bench, running her hand over the smooth wood surface. It was better equipped than anywhere she had worked before, with room to spread out and tackle large projects. "This will do fine. Better than fine." "Good. I have got 3 saddles that need repair, 2 sets of harness that are wearing through, and about a dozen other smaller projects. I will bring them over so you can see what needs doing." Emmett started to leave, then paused. "You hungry? I've got breakfast cooking in the cabin." The mention of food reminded Delilah that she had only had coffee before leaving that morning, and her stomach responded with a quiet rumble. "I could eat." The cabin's interior matched the barn's organization, clean, well-maintained, furnished simply but solidly. A cook stove radiated heat, and the smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. Emmett motioned toward the table, 4 chairs surrounding it, and Delilah sat while he served up plates of bacon, fried potatoes, and eggs from his chickens. "You live here alone?" Delilah asked, accepting the plate he handed her. "I do now. Had a hired man for a while, but he got married last fall and moved into town with his wife. Jacob stayed in the bunkhouse and helped with the cattle and the repairs, but like I said, he left for better wages in Durango." Emmett sat across from her with his own plate. "It is just me through the winter, and I hire on extra hands in summer when I move the herd up to the high meadows." They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Delilah found herself watching him covertly, noticing details. The way he handled his fork, the courtesy of offering her more coffee before refilling his own cup, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow in silent question. "Just thinking that Tom was right about you seeming decent." She spoke plainly, as was her habit. "Tom has known me long enough to have a fair measure." Emmett smiled slightly, the expression softening the sharp lines of his face. "And for what it is worth, he spoke highly of you too, said you were honest and skilled and did not tolerate any nonsense." "All true." Delilah finished her eggs and pushed back from the table. "Should we look at what needs mending?" They spent the rest of the morning going through the accumulated projects. The 3 saddles all needed similar repairs, stitching coming loose, leather drying and cracking in places, one with a broken stirrup strap that needed replacing. The harnesses were more complex, requiring careful assessment of where the wear was worst and how best to reinforce them without making them too stiff to work properly. Delilah made notes on a scrap of paper, listing materials needed and estimating time for each project. Emmett watched her work with quiet attention, answering her questions about how the gear was used and what stresses it faced. "I will start with the saddles," she decided. "Get those done first, then move to the harnesses. If I work steady, I should have everything completed within 2 weeks, maybe less. No rush. I would rather have it done right than done fast." Emmett gathered up the items they had looked through. "I will be working around the ranch most days. If you need anything, just call out or come find me." Delilah settled into the work with the satisfaction of having good tools and adequate materials. The first saddle came apart under her careful hands, and she assessed each piece, cleaning away old dirt and oil before beginning the repairs. The leather responded to her touch, and her needle moved through it with the rhythm born of long practice. The sun climbed and then began its descent, and she worked through the afternoon, stopping only when the light began to fail. Emmett appeared in the doorway as she was cleaning her tools for the day. "Getting late. You planning to ride back tonight or stay in the bunkhouse?" His tone made it clear that either choice was acceptable. Delilah considered. The ride back to Rico would take over an hour, and she would arrive after dark on a trail that could be treacherous in poor light. "I think I will stay, if that is still agreeable." "Of course. Come on up to the cabin for supper first. I've got stew cooking and there is plenty." He waited while she put away her work, then walked with her across the yard as dusk settled purple and gold over the valley. The stew was simple but hearty: beef and potatoes and carrots in a rich broth, served with bread that Emmett admitted he had bought from a woman in town who baked for sale. They ate at the same table where they had shared breakfast, and the conversation came easier now, flowing naturally through topics both significant and mundane. Delilah told him about her mother's washing business, about the hard years after her father's death when they nearly lost everything, about her determination to build a skill into something reliable. Emmett talked about learning cattle ranching through trial and error, about the harsh winter 2 years back when he lost 30 head to cold and starvation, about his hopes to expand the operation as his herd grew. "You ever want to do something other than mending leather?" He asked the question while pouring coffee, his tone curious rather than judgmental. "I like the work. There is satisfaction in taking something broken and making it whole again, making it useful." Delilah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, feeling the heat seep into her palms. "But I would not mind having a shop of my own someday, a real place where people could come for custom work, not just repairs." "That is a good dream, worth working toward." Emmett leaned back in his chair, studying her across the table. "You have got the skill for it and the determination. I expect you will make it happen if you set your mind to it." Something in his tone, the matter-of-fact confidence in her abilities, made Delilah look at him more carefully. Most men she encountered either dismissed her skills as novelty or acted surprised that a woman could do what they considered men's work. Emmett did neither, treating her capability as simple fact. "Thank you for saying so." She meant it, and she let him see that she did. The bunkhouse proved clean and well-maintained like everything else on the ranch, with 4 bunks and a small stove for heat. Emmett had already started a fire against the evening chill, and blankets lay folded at the foot of each bed. "Sleep well. I will have breakfast ready at dawn if you want to eat before starting work." He paused in the doorway. "And Delilah, I am glad you are here. It will be good to have help with all this again." She listened to his footsteps cross the yard back to the cabin, then prepared for bed in the flickering light from the stove. The bunk was surprisingly comfortable, and exhaustion from the long day pulled her quickly toward sleep. Her last conscious thought was that this felt right somehow, being here in this valley, working with her hands on something that mattered. The days developed a rhythm that felt natural as breathing. Delilah rose at dawn, shared breakfast with Emmett in the cabin, then worked through the morning and afternoon on the accumulated leather projects. The first saddle took 2 full days to complete, every stitch perfect, every piece cleaned and oiled until the leather glowed rich and supple. Emmett examined it thoroughly when she declared it finished, running his hands over her work with the careful attention of someone who understood quality. "This is excellent. Better than Jacob ever managed, and he was good." Emmett looked up from the saddle to meet her eyes. "You should be charging more for work like this. Maybe when I have that shop of my own." Delilah smiled, pleased despite herself by his praise. "For now, 50 cents a day suits me fine." She started on the second saddle, but Emmett interrupted mid-morning with a request that she look at a bridle one of his horses had broken. She followed him to the barn where a big black gelding stood in cross ties, and Emmett handed her the damaged bridle. Maximus here decided to argue with a tree and lost, broke the cheek piece clean through. Emmett stroked the horse's neck with obvious affection. "He is my best cutting horse, smart as they come but stubborn." Delilah examined the break, noting how clean it was. "I can fix this today, have it ready by this evening." "I appreciate it." Emmett moved to Maximus's other side, checking his hooves. "Want to ride out with me after lunch? I need to check the cattle in the north pasture, and you have been bent over that workbench for days. The fresh air might do you good." The invitation surprised her, but the idea of a ride through the spring countryside appealed strongly after days of close work. "I would like that." They rode out after a quick lunch of cold meat and bread, following a trail that wound along the creek, and then climbed into rolling hills where Emmett's cattle grazed scattered across the grassland. He pointed out individual animals, telling her their histories, which cows produced the best calves, which steers would be ready for market in fall. "You know them all," Delilah observed, watching him scan the herd with practiced eyes. "Most of them. When you are out here with them every day, they stop being just livestock and become individuals." He pointed toward a red cow with white patches. "That one there, I pulled her calf 2 years ago when she had trouble birthing. She tried to kick me 6 ways to Sunday, but the calf lived and so did she. Now she comes right up to me looking for scratches behind her ears." They rode further, checking water sources and looking for any cattle that might be injured or sick. Emmett's knowledge of the land showed in every comment, every observation about grass quality or where the snowmelt was feeding new springs. Delilah found herself listening closely, learning about this different kind of work that shaped Emmett's days. On the ride back, they stopped to rest the horses beside the creek, letting them drink while Emmett and Delilah sat on a fallen log in the shade of towering pines. The sound of water over stones filled the silence, peaceful and timeless. "Can I ask you something?" Emmett's voice was quiet, and when Delilah looked at him, his expression was serious. "You can ask. You miss your father. I know it has been 3 years, but I still miss mine sometimes, even after all this time." He picked up a pine cone, turning it over in his hands. "Thought maybe you might understand. Every day." Delilah spoke the truth simply. "He taught me everything I know about leatherwork, but more than that, he treated me like my thoughts mattered, like I had value beyond just finding a husband and producing children. I miss having someone who saw me that way." Your mother does not. She does in her way, but she also worries, wants me safe and settled, which to her means married to someone who can provide. Delilah pulled a long grass stem and twisted it between her fingers. I want more than that. Want to build something of my own first, stand on my own feet. Emmett nodded slowly. I understand that. After we lost the ranch in Texas, I swore I would never be dependent on anyone else's goodwill again. Wanted to make my own way, succeed or fail by my own efforts. And you have succeeded. Delilah gestured back toward the valley where his ranch lay. This is all yours, built by your work. So far, but ranching is uncertain. One bad winter, one drop in cattle prices, and it could all disappear. He met her eyes directly. That is why I understand wanting to build something solid before trusting your weight to it. They rode back as the afternoon stretched long and golden, and Delilah worked on the bridal repair until supper, finishing it just as Emmett called her to the cabin for the evening meal. He had made pan-fried trout from the creek, and they ate while discussing plans for the next week's work. If you finish those saddles and harnesses, I have got some smaller projects. Belts that need new holes, a saddlebag that is coming apart at the seams, things like that. Emmett refilled their coffee cups. Plus, I will need someone to maintain things as I use them. Gear wears out fast in this country. Are you offering me permanent work? Delilah asked directly, wanting to understand exactly what he meant. I am, if you want it. Same wages, steady work as long as it lasts. He looked at her seriously. I know you want your own shop someday, and this would not prevent that, but in the meantime it would give you reliable income. Delilah considered. Steady wages meant security for her and her mother, meant the ability to save money toward that eventual shop. It also meant spending her days here in this valley, working in the well-equipped shed and sharing meals with a man whose company she found increasingly pleasant. I accept. But I need to go back to Rico once a week at least, make sure my mother is managing, take her money for household expenses. She wanted the terms clear from the start, of course. Take Sundays if you like, or whatever day suits you best. Emmett extended his hand across the table. Deal. Delilah shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Deal. The weeks folded into each other, marked by the slow progression of spring into summer. Delilah completed the original projects, then moved to the smaller repairs, then to maintenance work as Emmett brought her items that needed attention. She rode to Rico each Sunday, spending the day with her mother, bringing money and news and reassurance that all was well at the ranch. Her mother's worry lines eased gradually as the weeks passed, and Delilah remained safe and content. On her fourth visit home, Martha fixed her with a knowing look over their Sunday dinner. This Emmett Irving, what is he like? The question carried layers of meaning. He is decent and fair. Treats me with respect, pays what he promises, keeps a good ranch. Delilah knew what her mother was really asking but chose to answer the surface question first. That is not what I mean, and you know it. Martha set down her fork. A young woman spending all her time alone with a young man, even doing honest work. People will talk. Let them talk. I am earning good wages doing skilled work, and I am not about to give that up because of gossip. Delilah met her mother's eyes steadily. Besides, Emmett has been completely proper. We work, we share meals, and that is the extent of it. Martha studied her daughter's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but you be careful of your heart as well as your reputation. I see something in your eyes when you talk about him. Delilah opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Her mother was not wrong. Somewhere in the daily rhythm of work and meals and conversations that ranged from practical to philosophical, she had begun to care about Emmett Irving beyond simple employment. She looked forward to their shared breakfasts, to the way he asked her opinion on ranch decisions, to the quiet evenings when they sat on the cabin's porch and watched the stars emerge over the mountains. "I will be careful," she promised, but she suspected it might already be too late for that. Summer arrived in full, and with it came the work of moving Emmett's cattle to the high meadows. He hired 2 additional hands for the season, brothers named Luke and Samuel, who set up in the bunkhouse and worked from dawn to dusk helping move the herd. Delilah found herself with less of Emmett's company during these weeks, as he spent long days in the saddle pushing cattle up the mountain trails to where the grass grew lush and green. She continued her work in the shed, maintaining gear and taking on new projects, and she shared the bunkhouse with her own corner curtained off for privacy now that other workers were present. Luke and Samuel proved good-natured and respectful, treating her as a fellow worker rather than an oddity. They brought her gear for repair and praised her work, and she appreciated their straightforward acceptance. But she missed the easy companionship she had developed with Emmett, the long conversations and shared meals that had become the backbone of her days. When Emmett finally returned from the high country, trail dusty and exhausted, Delilah felt something leap in her chest at the sight of him. He swung down from his horse in front of the barn, and his eyes found her immediately where she stood in the doorway of the workshop. "Everything go all right with the move?" she asked, proud that her voice came out steady and casual. "Well enough. Lost 1 calf to a cat, but the rest made it safe to the summer range." He pulled off his hat, running a hand through hair pressed flat from days under the brim. "Lord, I am tired. But I wanted to check in, see how you have been managing." "Managed fine. Luke and Samuel kept me busy with repairs, and I finished that custom saddlebag you wanted made." She gestured into the workshop where the finished bag hung on a peg. "Want to look at it?" They walked into the shed together, and Emmett examined the saddlebag with his usual thoroughness. Delilah had tooled a simple design into the leather, nothing fancy but enough decoration to lift it above purely utilitarian. "This is beautiful work." His fingers traced the pattern. "You have got real artistry, not just skill." "My father said the same thing, said I had an eye for design as well as execution." Delilah felt pleasure warm her at his praise. "I have been thinking I might make more custom pieces, try to sell them in Rico, or maybe even send them down to Durango to the bigger shops there." "You should. This is the kind of work people will pay premium prices for." Emmett hung the saddlebag back on its peg, then turned to face her fully. "I missed our conversations while I was up in the high country." The simple admission made Delilah's heart beat faster. "I missed them too." They stood looking at each other in the workshop's dim interior, and something shifted in the air between them. A recognition of feelings moving beyond friendship into territory, both more promising and more dangerous. Emmett took a step closer, then stopped, clearly thinking better of whatever he had been about to do. "I should clean up, get some rest. But would you join me for supper? I mean, just the 2 of us. Luke and Samuel have been cooking for themselves in the bunkhouse, and I." He trailed off, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I would like that." Delilah smiled, letting him see her pleasure at the invitation. They ate on the cabin's porch as the evening cooled, watching swallows dart after insects and listening to the creek's constant murmur. The food was simple, but the company was what mattered, and they talked long into the twilight about everything and nothing. "Can I tell you something?" Emmett asked as the first stars appeared. "Always. Having you here these past months, it has changed things for me. The ranch feels more like a home now, not just a place I work." He turned to look at her in the fading light. "You make it feel that way." Delilah's breath caught at the honesty in his voice. "You have changed things for me too. I came here just looking for work, but I found something more." Found a place where I feel valued for what I can do, where someone sees me clearly and likes what they see. I more than like what I see." Emmett spoke quietly, but the words carried weight. "I am courting you, Delilah Summers, if you have not noticed. Have been for weeks now, maybe months, just doing it so carefully that I was not sure you knew." Joy bubbled up in Delilah's chest, bright and effervescent as champagne. "I suspected, hoped anyway. And what do you think about it?" He asked the question with vulnerability showing through his usual confidence. "I think you are a good man, Emmett Irving. I think you have built something real and lasting here, and I admire that. I think I look forward to seeing you every day, and I miss you when you are gone." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I think I am falling in love with you, and it frightens me because I never planned for this. Love does not much care about plans." Emmett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. "I fell in love with you the day you bit that thread with your teeth and looked up at me like I was just another customer to assess and maybe accept. You were so fierce and independent and utterly certain of your worth. I have been lost ever since." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture both old-fashioned and sweet that made Delilah's heart turn over in her chest. She squeezed his fingers, holding on tight. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we see where this goes. No rushing, no pressure. Just you and me figuring out how we fit together." He smiled, and in the starlight it transformed his face into something tender and hopeful. "Does that sound all right to you?" "It sounds perfect." They sat together on the porch until the stars filled the sky in their millions. Hands linked, talking and falling silent and talking again with the easy comfort of two people who had found something rare and worth protecting. When Delilah finally walked back to the bunkhouse, her heart felt light as cottonwood down floating on a summer breeze. The courtship unfolded slowly and sweetly over the following weeks. Emmett was a thoughtful suitor, bringing Delilah wildflowers from the meadows, sharing the best pieces of meat at supper, finding excuses to work near the shed where he could see her and talk with her throughout the day. He kissed her for the first time beside the creek one evening, gentle and careful and full of restrained passion that left her breathless and wanting more. Delilah responded by making him a custom belt with his initials tooled into the leather, by laughing at his jokes, by learning to appreciate the work he did, even when it took him away for days at a time. She let herself soften in his presence, let down walls she had built against a world that so often disappointed. When Sunday came, she rode to Rico as usual and found her mother waiting with obvious curiosity. Over their meal, Delilah told her about Emmett's courtship, about the feelings growing between them, about the careful way they were building something real. "Do you love him?" Martha asked directly. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "I do. And does he love you?" "He says he does, and I believe him." Delilah met her mother's eyes. "I know it is fast, Mama. I know you worry, but this feels right in a way nothing else ever has." Martha reached across the table to clasp her daughter's hands. "Then I am happy for you. Emmett Irving has proven himself decent by his actions, and Lord knows you deserve someone who sees your value. Just promise me you will not lose yourself in loving him. Keep your skill, keep your independence, keep being the strong woman I raised." "I promise." "Emmett does not want me to be anything other than what I am. That is part of why I love him." Delilah squeezed her mother's fingers. "And you will always have a place with us, whatever the future brings." The summer progressed into autumn, and the cattle came down from the high meadows fat and healthy. Luke and Samuel left for other work, and the ranch settled back into its winter rhythm with just Emmett and Delilah in residence. They fell into domestic patterns that felt natural as breathing. Delilah cooking while Emmett finished evening chores, both of them reading by lamplight after supper, Emmett reaching for her hand whenever they walked together. On a crisp October evening with the aspens turned gold against the mountainsides, Emmett asked Delilah to walk with him after supper. They followed the creek upstream, past the barn and into the meadows beyond, until they reached a spot where the water pooled deep and clear beneath overhanging willows. "I have been thinking about the future." Emmett spoke without preamble, his hand warm around hers. "About what I want, what would make my life complete." Delilah felt her heart begin to race, sensing what was coming. "I want to build a life with you, Delilah. Want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Want to work this ranch together, build something lasting together." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I want to marry you if you will have me." The proposal was characteristically straightforward, lacking the elaborate romanticism she had read about in books, but carrying something better: honest emotion and genuine commitment. Delilah looked at this man who had hired her and courted her and won her heart through consistent decency and respect. "Yes." The word came out fierce and certain. "Yes, I will marry you." Emmett's face broke into a smile of pure joy, and he swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle while she laughed breathlessly. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Delilah kissed him back with all the love and hope and excitement filling her chest. "I do not have a ring yet," Emmett said when they finally broke apart, "but I will get you one, something worthy of you. I do not need a fancy ring, I just need you." Delilah cupped his face in her hands, memorizing this moment. "But I will need to tell my mother, and we should probably talk to the minister in Rico about when we can marry." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, making plans and dreaming aloud about their future. That night, Delilah stayed in the bunkhouse as she had since arriving months ago, but the knowledge that soon she would share Emmett's bed and life filled her with anticipation that made sleep difficult to find. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Rico, with Martha standing beside her daughter and Tom from the livery standing beside Emmett. Delilah wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool, made by her mother with care and love, and she carried wildflowers preserved and dried from the meadows around the ranch. Emmett wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed, and when he turned to see Delilah walking down the short aisle, his expression held such love and wonder that she felt tears prick her eyes. The minister spoke the traditional words, and they made their vows before God and the small gathering of townspeople who had come to witness. When Emmett kissed his bride, applause broke out, and Delilah felt happiness expand in her chest until she thought she might float away with it. The celebration afterward was modest, held in the church hall with food brought by well-wishers and music provided by a fiddler who played lively reels and sweet ballads. Delilah danced with her new husband, with Tom, with her mother, and with several of the townsmen who wanted to wish her well. As the afternoon wore into evening, Emmett pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Irving?" His eyes sparkled with love and something deeper, the promise of their wedding night ahead. "More than ready." Delilah squeezed his hand, and they slipped away from the celebration to where their horses waited. The ride back to the ranch took on a magical quality in the fading autumn light, the mountains purple against a sky going gold and rose. When they arrived, Emmett insisted on carrying Delilah across the threshold of the cabin, making her laugh with his solemnity about the tradition. Inside, he set her gently on her feet and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Delilah Irving. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already deserve me. We deserve each other." She reached up to kiss him, and he responded with enthusiasm, his hands moving to her waist, and then higher as the kiss deepened into something urgent and promising. They made their way to the bedroom, helping each other out of wedding clothes with hands that trembled slightly from excitement and nervousness. Delilah had not been with a man before, and Emmett sensed her uncertainty, taking his time and gentling his touch until she relaxed into the unfamiliar pleasure of intimacy. He was patient and tender, and when they finally came together completely, Delilah felt something click into place, a rightness that went beyond physical satisfaction into emotional completion. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, skin cooling in the night air, hearts gradually slowing from their racing pace. Emmett pulled a quilt over them and gathered Delilah close against his side, her head on his shoulder and his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. No regrets. He asked quietly, "None. You," she tilted her head to look up at him, "only that I did not find you sooner." He kissed her forehead. "But we have time now, all the time in the world to build our life together." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's warmth, and when morning came, Delilah woke to find Emmett watching her with such tenderness that her breath caught. "Good morning, wife." His voice was rough with sleep, intimate and warm. "Good morning, husband." The word felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. The winter settled in earnest over the following weeks, snow falling thick and transforming the valley into a landscape of white and shadow. The work changed with the season, focused on maintaining animals and equipment through the harsh weather, on keeping fires burning and water from freezing. Delilah moved her leather-working tools into a corner of the cabin where the light was good, and she continued her craft while Emmett handled the outdoor chores that cold demanded. Martha came to visit for Christmas, staying a week in the cabin's spare room and delighting in seeing her daughter so obviously happy and well-loved. She and Emmett developed an easy rapport, and before she left to return to Rico, Martha pulled Delilah aside for a private word. "You chose well, daughter. He is a good man and he loves you truly. I am at peace knowing you are settled and content." She hugged Delilah tightly. "Your father would be proud of you, of the woman you have become and the life you have built." The words brought tears to Delilah's eyes, and she held her mother close, grateful for the blessing and the acknowledgement that her choices had been right. Spring returned as it always did, melting snow and revealing grass greening beneath. Delilah discovered she was pregnant in April, the signs unmistakable once she paid attention to them. She told Emmett one evening over supper, speaking the words simply and watching his face transform with joy and wonder. "A baby." He said it like a prayer, like a miracle. "We are going to have a baby. In late October, I think." Delilah smiled at his obvious delight. "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. Emmett came around the table to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You have already given me so much, now this." "I do not have words big enough." He pressed his face against her still flat stomach, and Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed by love for this man and for the child growing inside her. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer, Delilah's body changing gradually to accommodate the new life. Emmett was attentive and protective without being smothering, helping with tasks that became awkward as her belly swelled, making sure she ate well and rested adequately. He talked to their baby every night, his hand on her stomach, telling stories about the ranch and the mountains and the life they would share. Martha came to stay in early October, arriving to help with the birth and the first weeks afterward. The baby came on a clear autumn morning, arriving after a night of labor that tested Delilah's strength, but ultimately proved straightforward. When the midwife from Rico placed the squalling infant in Delilah's arms, she looked down into her son's red face and felt love explode through her with devastating force. He is perfect." Emmett's voice was thick with emotion as he sat beside the bed, one arm around Delilah and one finger gently stroking their son's cheek. Absolutely perfect. They named him Daniel, after Delilah's father, and the baby thrived from his first breath. Emmett proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring Daniel to Delilah for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy. Watching her husband with their son, Delilah fell in love with Emmett all over again, seeing new dimensions of the man she had married. The years unfolded in a pattern of seasons and growth. Daniel grew from infant to toddler to boy, learning to walk in the ranch yard and to ride almost as soon as he could walk. Delilah continued her leather work, building a reputation that spread beyond Rico and brought in custom orders from as far away as Denver. Emmett's herd grew steadily, and he added land to the ranch, expanding their holdings and their security. A daughter arrived 2 years after Daniel, born in the spring and named a leaner after Emmett's mother. She had Delilah's dark hair and Emmett's blue-green eyes, and she proved to be as strong-willed as both her parents. Another son followed 2 years later, named Matthew, completing their family. Martha lived to see all 3 grandchildren born, passing peacefully in her sleep when Daniel was 7. They buried her beside Delilah's father in Rico's cemetery, and though grief came sharp and deep, Delilah took comfort in knowing her mother had lived to see her happy and settled with a family of her own. The children grew, and the ranch prospered. Emmett and Delilah worked side by side through seasons of plenty and seasons of hardship, their love deepening and maturing through shared joys and weathered difficulties. They expanded the cabin, adding rooms for their growing family, and built a proper workshop for Delilah's leather business where she employed 2 apprentices to help with the steady flow of orders. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Emmett took Delilah back to the spot by the creek where he had proposed. The willows were larger now, and wildflowers bloomed thick in the grass, but the essential character of the place remained unchanged. "You remember standing here 10 years ago?" Emmett asked, holding her hand as they had that evening. "Every detail. You asked me to marry you and I said yes." Delilah leaned against his shoulder. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Emmett corrected with a smile. "The best decision you made was taking that job mending saddles all those years ago. Everything else followed from that. Then I am grateful for broken gear and a cowboy who needed help." Delilah turned to kiss him, and the kiss held a decade of love and partnership and commitment. They walked back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Their children's voices drifted from the barn where Daniel was teaching a leaner and Matthew how to properly curry the horses. Smoke rose from the chimney where supper waited, and the mountains stood eternal and strong around their valley home. Delilah thought about the young woman she had been, sitting on that crate in Rico mending saddles for coins, determined and independent and alone. She thought about Emmett riding up and offering work, about the slow unfolding of friendship into love, about the life they had built together through intention and effort and grace. Years continued to pass in their steady rhythm, marked by the milestones of family and ranch. Daniel grew into a young man with his father's height and his mother's determination, and he took naturally to ranching, working beside Emmett from the time he was old enough to be truly useful. Elena proved to have inherited her mother's skill with leather, spending hours in the workshop learning the craft, and by her 14th birthday, she could produce work nearly as fine as Delilah's own. Matthew developed a gift with horses, able to gentle even the most fractious animals with patience and intuition. The ranch continued to expand, and Emmett took on permanent hired hands to help manage the growing operation. Delilah's leather business became renowned throughout Colorado. Her custom saddles and gear sought after by ranchers and cowboys across the territory. She had achieved the dream of her own shop, but in a way she had never anticipated, building it as part of a larger life rather than as a solitary venture. On a summer evening when Daniel was 19, Eleanor 17, and Matthew 15, the family gathered on the cabin's expanded porch to watch the sunset. It had become a tradition over the years, this quiet time together at day's end, and Delilah treasured these moments when her children were still present, and the family unit remained intact. "Father, I have been meaning to talk to you about something." Daniel spoke into the comfortable silence, and there was a note in his voice that made both Emmett and Delilah look at him sharply. "What is on your mind, son?" Emmett asked. "There is a girl in Rico, Sarah Mitchell, Tom's granddaughter. I have been courting her for several months now, and I would like to ask her to marry me." Daniel looked between his parents. "But I wanted your blessing first." Delilah felt her heart squeeze, recognizing that her boy had indeed become a man, ready to start his own family. Emmett's hand found hers, squeezing gently in shared recognition of this passage. "Have you talked to her father?" Emmett asked. "I have. He has given his consent pending yours." Daniel sat forward, earnest and hopeful. "I love her, father. She is strong and kind and smart. I think you will like her very much. If she has won your heart, then she must be exceptional." Emmett smiled at his son. "You have my blessing, and I expect your mother feels the same." "I do." Delilah's voice was soft. "Bring her to meet us properly, Daniel. Let us welcome her to the family." The wedding took place that autumn, and Sarah proved to be everything Daniel had claimed, a capable young woman who fit easily into the ranch's rhythms. She and Delilah developed a warm relationship, and when Sarah's first child arrived the following year, making Emmett and Delilah grandparents, the circle of family expanded with joy. Eleanor announced her own engagement 2 years later to a young saddle maker from Durango who had come to study with Delilah and fallen in love with her daughter. The wedding was beautiful, and watching Eleanor glow with happiness on her wedding day, Delilah remembered her own wedding and felt gratitude for the years that had brought them all to this place. Matthew took longer to settle, spending several years working on different ranches across Colorado and Wyoming, learning and growing and finding himself. But he eventually returned home with a wife of his own, a ranch woman from northern Colorado, and settled into his place in the family operation. The years accumulated like snow on the high peaks, steady and inevitable. Emmett's hair turned silver, and lines deepened around Delilah's eyes and mouth, but their love remained constant, the bedrock on which everything else was built. They became the family elders, grandchildren filling the ranch with noise and energy, and they watched with satisfaction as the enterprise they had built together continued to thrive across generations. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Delilah and Emmett rode out together to the high meadows where the cattle summered. It was harder for them to make the ride now than it had been in their youth, but they managed it still, wanting to see the place that had been so central to their lives. They dismounted beside a clear stream, letting the horses graze while they sat together on a sun-warmed rock. The mountains rose around them, massive and timeless, and the wind through the grass sang its ancient song. "Did you ever imagine this?" Delilah asked, gesturing broadly to encompass not just the landscape, but everything it represented: the ranch, the family, the life they had created. "I imagined working hard and building something that would last. I imagined having land and cattle and a measure of security." Emmett took her hand, lacing their fingers together. But I never imagined being this happy. Never imagined finding someone who would be my true partner in all things, who would challenge me and support me and love me so completely. I never imagined finding someone who would let me remain myself while still belonging fully to a partnership. Delilah leaned her head against his shoulder. You have given me room to grow while still holding me close. That is a rare gift. We have been good for each other. Emmett kissed the top of her head. Built something real that will outlast us both. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the cattle graze and the clouds drift overhead. Eventually, they mounted again and rode back down to the ranch, to the life waiting there, to children and grandchildren and the work that still needed doing. More years passed, and the new century arrived, bringing changes to the West that had been their whole world. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, and electricity came to Rico, though the ranch would wait longer for such modern conveniences. The old ways were fading, but on the Irving ranch, much remained as it had been, a testament to the enduring value of land and family and honest work. Delilah was 65 and Emmett 70 when he had a stroke one winter morning, falling in the barn while feeding horses. Daniel found him and got him into the house, and though Emmett survived, he was weakened, one side of his body partially paralyzed. The strong, capable man who had worked from dawn to dusk his entire adult life suddenly needed help with basic tasks, and the adjustment was hard for him. But Delilah had not forgotten what partnership meant. She cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her through pregnancy and childbirth, through her mother's death, through every difficulty they had faced together. She helped him relearn walking, speaking, using his affected hand. She read to him in the evenings and sat with him through long afternoons, her hand in his, reminding him without words that he was not alone. Recovery was slow but steady, and within 6 months Emmett had regained much of his mobility, though he would never be quite as strong as he had been. But he could walk the ranch with a cane, could ride if someone helped him mount, could still contribute in meaningful ways to the operation Daniel now largely ran. I am sorry, he told Delilah one evening as they sat together watching the sunset from their porch, a ritual unchanged by decades. For what? She looked at him in surprise. For becoming a burden, for not being able to do all the things I used to do. His voice carried frustration and sorrow. You are not a burden. You are my husband, my partner, the man I have loved for more than 30 years. Delilah took his hand firmly. We promised to stay together through everything, and this is just part of everything. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. Emmett's eyes shone with tears he was not too proud to shed. I love you, Delilah Irving, more than life itself. And I love you, Emmett Irving. Always have, always will. She kissed him gently, and they sat together as the sun painted the sky in glory. They had 5 more years together, years that moved more slowly but still held sweetness. They watched grandchildren grow into adults, saw great-grandchildren born. They celebrated Daniel's success in expanding the ranch, Aliner's reputation as one of the finest leather workers in Colorado, Matthew's skill in breeding horses that were sought after across the West. On a clear autumn morning, not unlike the one when they first met, Emmett died peacefully in his sleep with Delilah beside him. She woke to find him gone, his hand still warm in hers, his face peaceful in a way it had not been since the stroke. The grief was devastating but not surprising. She had known for some time that their time together was drawing to a close. They buried him in a plot on the ranch, overlooking the valley he had loved, with a simple stone marker that bore his name and the dates of his life. The family gathered from all their scattered locations, and they mourned together while celebrating the life of a man who had built something lasting. Delilah lived another 10 years after Emmett's death, remaining in the cabin they had shared, still doing leather work when her hands allowed, still advising on ranch decisions when asked. She became the family matriarch, the keeper of stories and history, the one who remembered where they had all come from. When she finally passed at 77, peacefully in her sleep like Emmett before her, they buried her beside him on the hillside. The stone marker beside his recorded her name and dates, and beneath both names, carved into the rock, were the words "Together always." The ranch continued, passing to Daniel and then to his children, maintained by succeeding generations who knew the story of the woman who had come to mend saddles and the cowboy who had hired and courted her. The leather workshop still stood, now a museum of sorts where Delilah's finest pieces were displayed alongside the tools she had used. The cabin was preserved, lived in still but carefully maintained in honor of the couple who had built it into a home. And on summer evenings, family members still gathered on that porch to watch the sunset over the mountains, continuing the tradition Emmett and Delilah had started so many years before. The love story they had lived became legend, passed down through generations as an example of what partnership and commitment and mutual respect could build. In the end, they had achieved everything they had worked for and more. Delilah had built her dream of a leather working business that carried her name and reputation across the territory. Emmett had established a ranch that prospered across generations, providing security and purpose for his descendants. But more than these accomplishments, they had created a love story that endured beyond their own lives, a testament to the power of two people choosing each other day after day, year after year, building something beautiful from the raw materials of work and hope and devotion. The mountains stood eternal over the valley, and the creek still sang its endless song. And in the workshop where Delilah had spent so many hours perfecting her craft, new hands learned the old skills, carrying forward the tradition she had established. Her great-great-grandchildren rode horses descended from the ones Emmett had raised, worked cattle that traced their lineage to his original herd, and lived in a place shaped by the choices two people had made long ago. It was a legacy of love, built saddle stitch by saddle stitch, season by season, choice by choice. And it endured solid and real, a testament to the truth that the best things in life are built slowly, with care and commitment, by two people willing to work together toward a common dream. The story that had begun with a young woman mending saddles for coins and a cowboy who needed help had become something larger than either of them had imagined, rippling forward through time, touching lives they would never know, proving that love, when tended faithfully, could indeed last forever.